While I know this is the marketing and development department and know you're all aware of the importance of the power of perception, when we are in crisis, it might be difficult to understand where our priorities lie and which direction to go in. So let's start with the basics. Part 3, the power of perception. This is key in understanding the many viewpoints in our society, and what we should do with that information is our responsibility. We at MAC Cosmetics should be able to look around us and not simply state that we don't have biases, because we do. We should confront those biases and make informed decisions with them in mind. This is the key to confronting those unconscious biases. The power of perception and how we operate within the biases we hold individually and collectively as a society. So what is a bias? How about an unconscious one? What types of biases we might hold is a good indication of how we might instinctively operate within those biases and how that affects our problem-solving skills. Let's travel back to the 20th century to understand what was happening and just how one person like Princess Diana or one brand like MAC Cosmetics can influence the outright biases society had against those with HIV/AIDS or human immunodeficiency virus infection and acquired immune deficiency syndrome. According to the BBC 2017, when HIV/AIDS was an unknown and scary disease, Princess Diana was upfront about the importance of showing compassion and understanding instead of treating victims with hate and vitriol. She did a lot to destigmatize the virus back in 1987 and backed it up with the effort to get medical help to those with HIV. She helped influence the culture around the virus. In 1994, according to our website, maccosmetics.com, we launched a campaign for Viva Glam Lipstick, an AIDS fund that donated every cent to fight HIV. Still, in a time when those with HIV/AIDS were stigmatized, according to Harper's Bazaar, MAC launched the campaign with iconic drag queen RuPaul, further breaking down barriers and raising awareness for all walks of life. Since then, the biases society held for those with HIV included the assumption, against scientific reasoning, that one could contract the virus through a simple handshake. Princess Di fought against that belief in 1987. There was also a belief that those who contracted HIV were certain people like homosexuals. This was not correct either, and MAC continuously fights the stigma through the fund to raise awareness of the virus and donates money from the Viva Glam proceeds to the causes to help people better understand, both in the 90s but also today. Sometimes the biases we hold is not a simple scientific fact away from how we should orient ourselves. When we are confronting issues internally or externally, it's important to remember we all have biases and to work in a collaborative way to overcome them. Let's say there is an external struggle. We need to look at the history of MAC and decide which direction the company meant to take, what direction it looked like MAC took, and how to solve the singular issue at hand while also figuring out how we plan to learn from it. Let's look at a recent issue our retail spaces have faced: racism and how we've handled it thus far. The UK's The Independent in 2020 reported on our apology to Black customers and employees within our retail space. A former employee bravely came forward with her experience for working with us and opened our eyes as to what management was saying about our Black customers, which was not to pay too much attention to them, and if employees did, they were allowed to treat them with less respect than what MAC would want, simply based on their skin color. The talent recruitment and engagement from the Office of Human Resources at the University of Wisconsin say there are two levels of biases here. The unconscious bias was to assume our management team was acting with the best judgment, instead of having checks and balances in place. Of course, we trust our employees, but to not have safeguards in place means we are allowing situations to fall through the cracks. This is especially serious as that former employee worked back in 2017, while this article was written 3 years later. There is also the issue that this wasn't a singular incident, but many people came forward and claimed these situations happened to them as well, in different parts of the world. Our statement was, we want to thank the individuals who have come forward and let them know how deeply sorry we are for the pain they felt and are still feeling. Our listening is not silence. Listening leads to learning, and everything we have heard and learned has helped to influence how we will take action now and for the collective future. We also say we have a zero tolerance policy on racism, and then some of the actions will be immediate. Others will take time, but we will ensure that all are lasting and impactful. We also say we pledge to hold ourselves accountable, which builds our long-standing commitment to inclusion and equality for all ages, all races, and all genders. So let's take a look at our response. This first tactic to discuss is from Lisa Gates in 2018, who talks about contentious tactics and more specifically, promises. She says this tactic involves getting what we want in the moment by agreeing to do something later. This is a tactic we first used. And it did work, but without action behind our statement, it will not work in the future, and in fact, it might even backfire. We make a promise to change and to ask for time to implement this change. We ask for time in exchange for a promise of a better environment. How do we fulfill this promise? First, Lisa Gates says, is to not cling to our biases. Our first instinct might be to say, they're wrong, they're lying, or that isn't the whole truth. But that doesn't help solve the problem. Yes, we as a company have always believed the inclusion of all people with our brand, but there were missteps along the way. The second bias to confront is fundamental attribution error, where Gates 2018 says this is just the actions of a few who slipped through the cracks, instead of looking at the way we got here. Maybe it was a lack of training, maybe it was a lack of open communication, or a lack of trust lower-level employees held that if they were to report something, there would be retaliation and they would not be believed. Maybe it's all or none of these, but it's our job as a development team to go into this and deep dive and conduct a deep dive to figure out what went wrong. In this case, what went wrong was directly against MAC standards. We are holding MAC standards and history as a guiding light into the future. Maybe someone on the team doesn't believe there isn't a problem at all. We can't make our coworkers come to the same conclusion as us, but this is where aligning ourselves with MAC message comes into play. I hope what we've discussed sheds some light on how we can deal with the power of perception and how it plays into our daily lives as people and as a team member at MAC.